Hi, I'm garden expert Charlie Nardozzi. It's spring and it's time to start gardening. I want to share with you some tips and techniques on how to grow a vegetable victory garden, some cool ideas on growing tomatoes, and a way to put together a beautiful flowering container. Plus, I'll share some ideas on perennial flower care and taking care of your shrubs. So join me as we grow the best garden ever this summer. Everyone's growing more vegetables and herbs for good reason. Growing your own produce is a great idea because you know it's going to be healthier for you. It's going to taste good, you know it's been sprayed on it, so it's going to be safer, and most importantly, it's going to save you money. Growing our own produce during times of crisis is part of our American history. Back in the First World War, we grew Liberty Gardens, and these gardens were grown so we could support the war effort. During the Second World War, this idea bloomed into the Victory Gardens. In fact, in 1943, we grew almost 40% of our own produce in backyard gardens, community gardens, church gardens, and public spaces. And that trend continues to this day. Whenever we have economic downturns or natural disasters, people turn to the garden. And what happens is that when you're growing your own food, you have a sense of control over what's going on, and you're able to feed your family at the same time and have a little sense of peace of mind. So let me show you how to grow a very simple and effective garden. The best way to grow your own vegetables is in a raised bed. Raised bed gives you lots of advantages when you're growing vegetables and herbs. When you create a raised bed, you create pathways in between, so it's really clear for kids and animals and yourself where the gardens are, where the paths are. And also, you're not going to be stepping on that soil. And this is really important because when you step on the soil, you compact it. And when you compact the soil, the roots won't grow so well. And finally, one of the best reasons for growing raised beds is that you can plant things closer together, you don't have to weed, and it's more productive. Now, there's different kinds of materials you can use for raised beds. Certainly wood is probably the most popular one. There's lots of different kinds of woods, but I like cedar. Cedar is a great wood because it's very rot resistant. It can last 10 to 15 years before it rots out. The downside of cedar is that it can be a little expensive. So you may want to use hemlock or spruce, and that's fine. You're just going to have wood that'll rot out a little bit sooner. You want to avoid chemically treated woods. That wouldn't be a great idea, but you can try some of these new recycled composite woods. They should last a long time too. There's all kinds of materials you can use. There are metal raised beds out there that are prefabbed, or you can go to an ag supply store and get a horse or cow watering trough and turn it into a raised bed. It's really that simple. This is one that we put together using just some old wood that we had, as well as some new wood that we used to fashion it into the size we wanted. This is hemlock. It's 2-inch thick. You want to get 2-inch thick wood because that's going to, of course, last a little bit longer. But when you're building a raised bed, you want to keep the width of it no more than 4 feet. That way you can reach into the center of the bed from any angle and never have to step on the soil. The depth of the bed could be anywhere from 8 to 10 inches. Now, if you have a real impervious surface like asphalt or compacted gravel, you might want to go up to 12 inches high. That way you have a lot more soil so those roots can really grow well. And as far as how long the bed is, that really can be up to you. You can make it as long as you want. I like the 6 to 8 foot length. That way you're not dealing with really long pieces of lumber that can bow and kind of warp over time. Now, there are different ways to keep the bed square too. I just use some 4x4 blocks here that I screwed in. There are metal raised bed corners that you can get that are really nice because you just slide the lumber into them, and of course the metal will hold it in place for a longer period of time. Now, where you put your raised bed will dictate what you put underneath the bed. If you're doing it in a grassy area, for example, or a weedy area, you might want to put something down there that'll block the grass and weeds from growing up. One of the best things is cardboard. But just lay it into your bed all the way down, secure it, and then just pile your soil on top of that. That's a simple thing to do. Now, another problem some people often have is with mice and voles getting in their raised beds. They often will dig underneath the bed, come up, and they're just like those cartoon characters. They steal the carrots. You know, you pull the carrot and there's nothing underneath it. That's usually mice and voles. So a way to get around that is to use hardware cloth. Lay the hardware cloth down, staple it or attach it to the bottom of the bed, and that'll prevent them from tunneling underneath and getting into your crops of carrots and sweet potatoes. Next, you want to put soil in your bed. Now, you just don't want to put any soil. One of the nice things about raised beds is you can put a custom blend of soil in. You don't want to just do all topsoil, and you don't want to just do all compost. A 50-50 mix is ideal. Now, you can use your native soil if you have really good native soil, but if it's a little on the heavy side, like a clay, then you might want to mix in some potting soil too. The nice thing about bringing soil in is that it tends to be weed-free and it's very fertile. So when you're planting a raised bed, you've got a couple options. If you're just planting a small little raised bed, so maybe a couple tomatoes, a couple squash, a couple cucumbers, the easiest thing would be to just get the transplants from a local garden center. That way you can just pop them in, and anything that's grown from a transplant is going to have a higher likelihood of success than if you put a seed in the ground, because the seed could rot if the weather gets a little too wet and cold. Also, if you wanted to grow a lot of things though, you might want to start a bunch of things from seed. You know, you can get seedlings of pretty much anything these days. I've even seen corn and beets as seedlings. But you can also start lots of things like beans and peas and all the root crops from seed in the ground. The nice thing about that is it's a lot cheaper, and you can use it if you have a lot of different raised beds and you're growing a lot of food for yourself. When you're planting your seeds, the traditional way to do it is to plant in straight rows. Try this method instead. It's called broadcast seeding. What you'll do is you mark out an area that you want to have as your crop. Maybe this section right here will be a good one to do. And then you can plant some of your seeds right into that area, just scattering the seeds. What I'm going to plant in this area is I'm going to plant actually 3 different kinds of seeds at once. This is carrots, beets, and radishes. Open up the packets and sprinkle the seed all through that area. I'm not going to worry about spacing. I'm not going to worry about the thickness of that seed or any of them. One of the nice things about this is that this seed, you can see, is very small. So by scattering it, you don't have to worry about any of the spacing. We're just going to scatter it lightly through here so you get seed all through this area. Then I'm going to do the same thing with my beet seed. The same idea, just sprinkling it, not worrying about burying it at this point. The beet seed's a little bit bigger, you can see. And beet is an interesting seed because it's actually a dried fruit, so you get a number of seedlings from each one of these little seeds. And we're just going to sprinkle some of that in here too, just liberally around. And then finally, I'm going to do some radish seed on top of that. I'm putting all 3 of these root crops together. And you can see the radish seed, again, it's a little bit bigger. We're going to sprinkle some of that in here. The reason I'm putting them all together is that they germinate at different times. So the radish seed will germinate really quickly, and it'll break up the soil as it gets crusty and old. And then the beets will come after that, and that will provide more space for the slowest germinating seed, which is the carrots. Now that I've got it all sprinkled here, I can just pat it down a little bit just to get a nice contact with the soil and the seed, and then take some of the soil that I just used here, or some potting soil, either way, and just sprinkle that over the top. Simple as that. By sprinkling it over the top just lightly, because remember, these are small seeds, you don't want to bury them too deep. That's going to keep them covered and keep them ready to go. Then we'll just water it and keep it well watered. So in a day, you can get your raised bed all set up and planted and ready to go, so you have a bountiful harvest that summer. Gardening is a nice entryway into nature. It gets you outside, it gets you interacting with plants, gets you interacting with the environment, the birds, and so it kind of gets you back to your roots, which we all started, growing our own food and living that way. And I think it's a good way for people to start appreciating nature more by doing a garden. I remember walking around with my Italian grandfather. He would have a huge vegetable garden, and he would do the typical Italian gardening technique with the tomatoes. I love tomatoes. How can you not love tomatoes with a name like Nardozzi, right? Tomatoes are the most popular vegetable grown in our gardens. There are literally hundreds of different varieties, different shapes, colors. The plants have different sizes and certainly different flavors. Some of them have cool names too, like Cherokee Purple, Constelluto Genovese, Brandywine, and Whopper. What tomato you're going to grow in your garden will really depend upon the size of the plant and the use. If you're just going to grow your tomato to eat in salads, maybe you use some of a cherry or the grape-sized tomatoes. Those are really easy to snack on. If you want to slice some in a sandwich, definitely get the round tomatoes to do that. Or if you want to bake with them, this is a good idea too. If you want to make some sauces, you want to get some of the plum tomatoes or the pear tomatoes. Those meaty tomatoes have a lot of nice flavor to them. Whatever tomato variety you choose to grow, make sure you grow it in the right place with full sun, of course, and in a bed where you can keep it well watered and growing really well. And when you're planting them, sometimes you'll get varieties like this one that are kind of tall and leggy. There's a little tip I can give you that's really particular just to tomato plants. You can literally prune off all these bottom leaves, just like this, and plant it so it's not so leggy anymore. The problem with leggy plants is that they flop over really easily. So once you prune it off, you can create a little furrow. Place the root ball down and place it horizontal, just like that, in the bed, and then fill it back in. We're going to dig this a little deeper. Fill it back in all the way up to where the leaves are, and then just bend it gently, just like that. And there you've planted your tomato plant so that it's more vertical. That is what it should really look like. From there, it'll grow up and be really strong. When planting your tomatoes, you want to plant them at least about 3 feet apart, especially these taller varieties. Now this will change depending upon the variety. There are really tall ones like those heirlooms I was mentioning. Those are called indeterminate plants. They can grow really big, maybe up to 5-6 feet tall, so they need at least a 3-foot spacing between them. There's another type called determinate, which stays only about 3 feet tall. You can plant those a little tighter. Then of course there's the bush varieties that you can grow in containers or in a bed. Those don't have to be that far apart at all. Depending upon the variety you have, you'll do that spacing, but also you'll have a lot of space in between these plants before they really take off. This is an opportunity to plant more vegetables. So what I like to do between my tomato plants is plant some lettuce or any kind of green. It could be Swiss chard, it could be kale, it could be any green that you're going to be eating. The nice thing about planting these in between your plants is that these lettuces are going to grow up really fast, and you're going to harvest them before the tomatoes actually get too big to shade them out. So you actually maximize your spacing of the tomatoes, and in the raised bed you get 2 for 1. And that's great if you only have a few small raised beds because you really want to maximize it. This whole technique is called intercropping, if anyone ever asked you. Once your tomatoes are planted, then you're going to have to support them. And that will also depend a little bit on the type of tomato you plant. If you plant a dwarf variety, they're probably not going to need a support. If you plant a determinate variety, and it'll tell you that on the tags if you're wondering how to find out what kind of variety you have, those will need some supports. If you're growing those indeterminate, those big ones, you know, the indeterminate heirlooms, those are going to need a lot of support. And there's lots of different options. The traditional way to support your tomatoes is with a wooden stake. It's pretty simple. You just pound the stake in right by the tomatoes. Don't worry about damaging the roots. When you do it when they're young, they'll recover really quickly. Once you pound it in, then you want to support the tomato by tying it to the stake. Now this is a technique that old Italians, like my grandpa, used to do all the time. They'd have your stake and your tomato, and they'd have 20 of them, 30 of them, all tied up nice and neat and tidy. So I like to use Velcro brand plant ties because these are reusable. They're nice, they're really flexible, they're easy on the plants, which is really good. So you're not going to be cutting the stem when you're cutting your plant, when you're tying up your plant. And you simply just tie it around the stem as it grows and support it. Simply just like that. And then as it keeps growing, you keep supporting that, and you prune them out a little bit so it stays one stem going up with fruit and leaves on them. So that's great if you want to have a little high maintenance tomato plant. But I'm not into high maintenance, so let me show you some other options that are out there. You probably have seen the round tomato cages. The small ones are great not for tomatoes, or maybe dwarf tomatoes, but more for peppers and eggplants. Don't use those on the big tomato plants. The big round tomato cages are better, but they still will flop over during a summer thunderstorm because once those plants get big, they get really heavy and a tomato won't be able to hold them up. A better option are the square wire cages. These have more legs to them, and because they're square, they're more solid. You simply just push them in right around the plant. I'm done. That's as easy as it is. These are great, especially for those determinate plants that only get about 3 feet tall, but they also will support the indeterminates that'll get up a little bit higher. If you want to go a little more space age, this is a new product that just came out. It's called the Vertex Tomato Support. This one is pretty cool. This is made out of a rust-proof aluminum, very lightweight to it. It kind of got a hexagonal shape to it. And what's really nice is that when you put it in around the plant, just like we did with the square one, you push it into the soil, You can stack more on top of these so you can make it as tall as you want. Now what's great about these hexagonal shape is that if you forget to actually put it around your tomato, it has clips, so you can open it up, wrap it around the tomato plant, and then re-clip it. Once you're done with this at the end of the season, it just folds up just like this. Pretty easy to store in a garage or in a basement. So whatever support you're trying to put together for your tomatoes, make sure it's appropriate for that variety and it's sturdy, because the last thing you want are tomatoes flopping on the ground in July and August, rotting on the ground and the plant breaking when you've worked so hard to get them to grow. After you've got it all planted, of course you want to keep it watered. You can certainly hand water, or you can use a soaker hose. This is a great way to water your tomatoes or any plants in your vegetable garden. What's nice is that the soaker hose is wrapped around the plants and it just slowly oozes water out. Finally, you want to do a little side dressing. Most of the vegetables you're going to be growing, if you have nice topsoil and compost, you're not going to need to fertilize too much. But with long season vegetables like tomatoes and squashes and melons, it's good to what we call side dress. That means putting some organic fertilizer around it maybe every month. It's very simple. All you need to do is get a granular organic fertilizer meant for vegetables. Take a handful of it and just simply sprinkle it around what we call the drip line, or the outside edge of the plant. And if you do this, say, once a month or once every 3 weeks, and work it into the soil a little bit, it'll keep those plants growing strong and being really healthy. Because what we want at the end is a bountiful harvest of tomatoes that we can freeze, we can can, we can eat fresh, we can give away to friends and family. They're gonna love us. So good luck with your tomato growing. Gardening is fun and easy, but what happens if you don't have a yard, or your yard is not a great place to grow a garden? Container gardening to the rescue. Container gardening has come a long way since clay and plastic pots. There are new kinds of containers out there. There are a wider variety of vegetables, herbs, and flowers you can grow, and there's some great tips and techniques that make container gardening a snap. So let's talk about containers. Clay is the classic container that lots of people plant their flowers in. Clay is great because it breathes, so it'll dry out. It'll never get too soggy in there. But you want to match the right plants for this container. So for example, a container like this, maybe you put geraniums in it, or portulacas, or lantana, plants that like it a little drier. Even sedums and succulents would do really well in a clay pot. Now there's some downsides to clay pots. If I dropped it right now, you know what's going to happen. It's just going to shatter. Or if you forget about it in the winter, it'll just crack because of the freezing and thawing. So you have to protect these containers and keep them in good shape throughout the year. Another option, is my mama's sausage pot. This is one that we used to make homemade Italian sausage. It's a crock pot. A lot of people have ceramic containers like this. And what's great about these is that they have a glaze on them, so they don't breathe as much as the clay pots. And they're really nice and really attractive in and of themselves. Now this one doesn't have a drainage hole, and that's really important because you don't want the water to accumulate, but there's a way around that. It's a little tip I'll show you. If you look in the bottom here, I put a bunch of plastic pots upside down, they're empty, and then I put window screening on top of that. If you have that in the bottom of your container and then put soil on it, what happens is it creates a little reservoir in the bottom. So there is water drainage and your plants don't rot in the really wet weather. So ceramic is a nice one to use too. And as we continue through, how about a wood pot? Everyone's seen half whiskey barrels and half wine barrels, right? This is a smaller version of that. Wood is really nice because it does breathe. You can get really big versions of these pots, so you can grow big perennials, maybe even a shrub in them too. But on the downside, they eventually rot. So you have to know what kind of material you have. If the pot's in a place where you have to move it a lot, that might be a little hard with a wood pot because it can get pretty heavy. Now let's get a little more avant-garde. How about a metal pot? This is like the latest trend. Everyone's using metal pots. It could be corrugated metal, it could be galvanized metal. What's nice about metal pots, certainly, is because they can last a long time. This one doesn't have a drainage hole, but no problem drilling holes into this metal pot. They could be attractive, you can put all kinds of plants in them. The downside of these is that metal gets hot, so it'll really heat up in the summer, so you gotta watch what plants you put in there. You wanna put in plants that can take the heat. So you want to put maybe a hot pepper in here, for example, or a sweet potato, or something of that nature that likes a nice warm pot. Now we'll talk about my favorite. These are the new polymer resin pots. These pots are shaped like, well, all kinds of other pots. This one looks like it could be a metal urn, but it's made out of this polymer resin that is lightweight, durable, UV stabilized, a really nice one to grow. Look at that. It's really easy to move it around. So these pots can be left outside without any problem, and you can grow pretty much any kind of plant in this container. These polymer resin pots also come with self-watering mechanisms to them. So this is a false bottom that you can see in here. And what you'll do is that through the drainage hole, add water in, and that'll fill up the reservoir. So then you put your soil in, and then through osmosis, that water will move from the bottom reservoir up into the soil, keeping your plants nice and moist. You can go away and go to the beach for the weekend and not have to worry about your containers any longer. Once you have your container, then you got to think about where you're going to put it on your deck, patio, or balcony. If it's a full sun location, you can have a whole range of different kinds of vegetables and flowers to grow. But even if it's a little shadier, there'll be some plants that can grow well in there. So for example, for vegetables, you can grow greens and some root crops. Or for flowers, of course, begonias and impatiens and snapdragons do okay in a shady spot, and some great foliage plants too, like coleus. So knowing where the sun is on your deck, patio, and balcony is important, because where the sun is in May and June may be different than where it is in August and September. For that reason, you may have to move your containers around, and that's another advantage for container gardening. Moving them around is pretty easy to do, so you can have that space and have those containers in the right place. You can move them around also for activities. Maybe you're having a dinner party, or maybe you have kids or grandkids around. You just want to create a little more space. Moving containers around is pretty easy to do, and it can be really a great way to have a garden and not impinge on your lifestyle. We're going to take this big one right here. Of course, the bigger the pot, the more plants you can put in it and the more dramatic it's going to look. But also you have to keep in mind, a big pot can get pretty heavy. This one's fun because it has casters on the bottom of it, so you can roll it around much easier than having to lift it up every time. So now that you have your pot, you put, of course, some nice potting soil in it so that it has filled up a couple inches from the rim. And then the fun begins. You can start planting things in it. You can just do a simple one type of plant in the container, just like I did here with this geranium. It looks gorgeous just by itself. But I like to mix and match things, and there's a cool technique that you can use called the thriller, filler, and spiller technique. This one will maximize the space above the container and all the way down to the ground. How you do this is you get a tall plant that you're going to put in the center. So for example, this is papyrus. Now if I put this in the center, you won't see me anymore. So we're not going to use this one. But this is a good example if you have a large pot to put something really tall. It's really a stunning looking plant. But we're going to go with something that'll get tall, but not too tall, like maybe just a traditional red geranium in the center. Once you have your centerpiece in there, then you want to put some filling plants around it. Plants that will fill out, like petunias, for example, or some of this celosia that I have here that we can mix and match in there. These will be filler plants that get maybe a foot tall, nice rounded shape to them, fill out the center of the container. And then the last part is the spiller. These are plants that will cascade over the edge, like this scaevola, for example, that we would put in there, or this dichondra is really nice. These are plants that will grow down to the ground, so that when this is mature in midsummer, you're going to have a tall plant that'll go up a couple feet. You're going to have plants around the center, and you're going to have plants spilling down to the ground. It'll make that container look more stunning. Now, another thing people always wonder about with containers is, how do you mix and match the colors? Well, a lot of that is really up to you and your personal preferences. But there are a few things you want to look for. So for example, you want to pick up highlights in different leaves and in different flowers. Leaves a lot of times will have a lot of color, and they give you a lot more variety because you don't have to wait for the flowers to really get something attractive. This is a Persian shield. It's a beautiful foliage plant, and you can see it's got some kind of pinkish color in there. So what I would do is I would pick up this pink petunia, mini petunia, and have those together. So it's a nice combination, picking up a little bit of that pink color in the leaf. You can do that with lots of different plants. So for example, this is an annual dianthus. beautiful pink flowers with a little rose center to them. This is a new form of celosia called lizard leaf. It's got a nice burgundy colored leaf. That's a nice combination together as well. You can see it picks up that color, and then you can offset it a little bit with this dichondra, which is just a silver leaf plant, a very neutral color, so it really fits with almost any other colored plant. So mixing and matching colors is really a personal preference in how you want to do it. So let me put this together and I'll show you what it'll look like when it's all done. So here it is. How do you think I did? I think it looks pretty good. A whole combination of different colors and textures in one flower container. But it's not just about flowers. You can grow all kinds of combinations of herbs and vegetables in containers. Modern breeding has created plants that are dwarf and productive, so you can grow a lot of things even in a small pot. Of course, the bigger the pot, the more you can grow. But you can grow big plants that normally you think of as garden plants like squash, cucumbers, and tomatoes in a pot. Pretty cool, huh? So this one is an herb container. This is made with rosemary in the center, kind of like your thriller plant. Cascading plants like this oregano and thyme on the side, kind of like your spiller plant, and maybe a few little lettuce plants in here like your filler plants. So this is kind of a nice decorative pot and a great one to have right outside the kitchen so you can grab some things when you're cooking. This is a cute little tomato pot, and this is a great variety. It's called Tidy Treats. It's a dwarf indeterminate variety, which means it stays bushy, but it produces cherry tomatoes all season long. I popped in some marigolds for some color, and these marigold petals are actually edible too. You can do a similar thing in containers with root crops like carrots and beets and radishes. You can do it with beans. You can create a salad garden. You can create almost any kind of vegetable in a container that you like, as long as you have the right light conditions and the right kind of pot and soil and plants that will fit in those containers. Now that you've got it all planted, you're going to have to water and fertilize it well. These containers have potting soil that tend not to have much fertilizer in them, so you're going to have to add it either by watering when you put a little fertilizer in the water or with time-release pellets. I like using different organic products that you can mix in the water that you can just add to it maybe every other time or so that you're watering your plants at a very diluted dose, just enough to keep the plants growing strong. If you don't want to bother trying to remember that, you can use these time-release granules. These are nice because you just sprinkle them in the pot, and every time you water with regular water, they release fertilizer into the container. That'll keep your plants growing strong right through the growing season. So this is all you really need to do to keep your container garden growing strong. And by growing containers on your deck, balcony, or patio, you'll have flowers and food all summer long. There's nothing like spring in the perennial flower garden. It starts early, and then the colors cascade into summer and fall with different hues and tones and textures. But all of this beauty that you're seeing doesn't come easy. You have to do a little work too. You'll have to do a little dividing, maybe moving perennials around so they're in better places, weeding, and maybe some care of those perennial flowers. So let's go through the tasks in the spring perennial flower garden. There are two different types of perennials that you can divide. There are clumpers and there are spreaders. Now, the spreaders you're not dividing because you need them to flower more. They flower fine on their own. A good example of those are bee balm. But mostly you're dividing these so you can keep them restricted. They tend to spread everywhere. So the first thing to do is kind of decide how far you want it to spread and then cut out around it to remove all those plants that you don't need in that area. Before we divide the bee balm, let's prune it. This is a sweet little tip that I learned how to do. When they're this size, you can cut back the tops of your bee balm, and what it's going to do is going to force it to bush back out and flower at a shorter size. So it'll be a little bit more compact, which will be really nice for the bee balm. Once you've done that, then you can go ahead and decide which ones you're going to divide and cut all of those branches back, because you're not going to need all this foliage. It's just going to get in the way and make it harder for the plant to survive. Once we have all of this cut back, then we bring in the shovel. And we just decide where we want to dig first and go around the edge, just digging around and taking out sections of your bee balm. And just dig in straight all around, as many angles as you can, and pull out a nice section. And at this point, it's nice to put it
out on a tarp. That way you can kind of see the root system, see where you can actually tease it apart. So this one, we have a number of different plants. You really only need a couple shoots, like this, for example, would be a nice example of just a nice little shoot that'll turn into a new plant. So when you have a nice clump that you like, get a pot you want to put it in, throw some potting soil in that pot with the division, and then you can just give it some water and it'll be fine in there for a while. You can give this away at this point, or you can move it to a different section in your garden and plant it. We actually did this about a week or so ago, and you can see the new divisions over there, how they bounce back and they're growing. They'll probably even flower for us this year. After you're done with the spreaders, then there are the clumpers. These are plants like irises, peonies, asters. They stay in a nice clumped form, but one of the downsides of these, like the irises, is they stop flowering when they get overcrowded. Then, of course, there's the daylily that never stops flowering. But this one is getting too big. In fact, this one is here all by itself because we moved some gardens around and some fencing, so now we've got to move this one too. These clumpers can be tough, so you want to dig down deep around them to really kind of get them out. They have really tenacious root systems. And this one I'm just going to cut it in half because it is really big. And don't feel shy about cutting right into the foliage of these. It's okay because the foliage may die back a little bit anyway from just having the roots disturbed. But there we go, we got it. I'm going to pull it off and put it right here on the tarp. You might need a knife to pull them apart, or with your hands, if depending upon how many you want to get out of this, you can just pull them apart with your hands and look at that. Now, of course, this will take a number of years before it gets big enough to flower, so you might want to take out bigger clumps and bigger sections of it. For some, you might have to use a saw or an axe just to rip them apart. Once you have these all separated out how you want them, then you're going to put them in a place with similar kind of environmental conditions, the sun and the soil. Keep them really well watered, and they will bounce back. It'll take them a little while, but they will bounce back. And once they're all set in there, you can move on to the next plant. Spring is amazing in New England. I'm here at Shelburne Museum in Shelburne, Vermont, home of hundreds of flowering shrubs, especially lilacs. And while it's important to take a little moment to enjoy it, there are a number of tasks you can do to make your flowering shrubs look even better. I teach a lot of classes, and one of the most popular ones is on pruning. People are mystified with pruning. They're not quite sure what to do with it. So I want to talk a little bit about it, especially when to prune and how to prune. As far as when to prune, if you have a spring flowering shrub, like the ones I just mentioned, the forsythia, the lilac, the weigela, the rhododendrons, you want to prune those after they're done flowering. You have about a 6-week window to prune them before they set flower buds for the next year. So that means if you go prune your shrub in August or September, you're going to be pruning off flowers that would have been blooming the next spring. You don't want to do that. If you have shrubs though that bloom later, after July 1st or so, like the rose of Sharon, the panicle hydrangea, the cletheras, butterfly bushes, all of those can be pruned right now. They bloom on new wood. So you can prune them back, they'll form new wood, and you get a lot more flowers. One of the questions I often get about flowering shrubs is, do I have to deadhead them? And lilacs is a great example. And here's a shrub that, well, you see both examples of it. You see where the new flowers are coming out, but you also see a lot of places where they did not deadhead, and you see the result. Anywhere where there was a branch where they have old seed pods over there does not have new flowers. So that tells you, if you can, if the shrub is not too large, it's important to deadhead. Because what happens is after the flowers are done, they start forming seeds, and those seeds take energy away from the shrub to form new flower buds. So what I would do, if you can do it right after the lilac or whatever flowering shrub you have is done blooming, just snip it off. Snip off all those old flowers so that you'll give the plant the energy to create new flowers for the next year. If you can't reach them, or if there's just so many of them, it's just not reasonable to get them, you probably can leave them and the shrub will probably bloom fine. But a shrub like this that's really not doing so great, it's kind of struggling a little bit, it would really be a good advantage to take off those old flower blossoms so that it can be rejuvenated, be more vigorous next year. Sometimes your shrubs get so huge like this lilac, you can't even enjoy them. the flowers are way up high in the sky and the shrub has gotten too big for the space. Let me show you a technique called the 3-year rotational pruning that allows you to keep some flowers and reduce the size of the shrub. You want to take a look at the number of main canes or main branches that are coming up off the ground. If there's, say, 9 of them, the first year you want to take out a third or 3 of them. Cut them down to the ground or down to about a foot tall. And then the second year do the second third, and then finally the last year you do the last third. It sounds complicated, but it really isn't. Let me show you how you would prune these down. So we're going to cut it about a foot or so off the ground, just making a nice cut with your pruning saw. Make sure it's nice and even. And it'll force up a lot of these little suckers that are around here so that you'll lose some of the height, but you'll keep some of the older branches for flowering. So thinning out main limbs in your shrub is a good way to reduce the size and just prune it in general. It's a much better way to prune than pruning it from top down. Spring is also a great time to plant some flowering shrubs. But before you go out and dig your hole, take a look at the shrub that you bought. Better yet, when you go to the garden center, figure out how big that shrub is going to ultimately be. A lot of times people will buy a shrub that they think fits really nicely now and forget that it'll get much larger. Look at the ultimate size on the tag and find out a spot in your yard where it'll actually fit so it can be there for years. There's nothing worse than having to prune back a shrub to fit in a space because it's encroaching on a walkway or a window. We have a nice viburnum here, and I'm going to show you some tips on how to plant it. The first thing you want to do is dig a hole 3 times the diameter of the root ball. So this root ball is about, I'd say 8 inches. So I'm going to go out about 2.5 feet around this shrub. And the reason you want to do that is that this shrub is going to need a lot of space to grow, and you want to loosen up the soil all around it. It can be just as deep as it was in the container, but you want to make sure to have a nice circular hole all around. Now that I've dug my hole, I'm going to do something a little unusual. I'm going to take the plant out of the pot and I'm going to knock all the soil off of it. Now there's a reason for doing this. I'm not just doing this to be mean to the shrub. A lot of times when you have a shrub, if they've been in a pot a long time, they'll get roots that circle around. And if you let those roots continue to grow, eventually they can strangle the shrub or strangle the tree. I've seen this happen a lot with trees. So you can have a shrub that's growing fine for 3, 4, 5 years. All of a sudden, it just dies. You dig it up, you find this big root wrapping all the way around the tree. So we want to avoid that. And how we're going to do it is put the root ball right in a bucket of water, and then we're going to tease out all the potting soil that's in there. This plant will be fine. And by teasing out all the potting soil, we'll get a sense of what the roots look like and if we have to prune anything anywhere. It's kind of like washing the roots. There we go. So we have a better sense of what the root system looks like now. Just holding it up here. And in general, it looks pretty good. You know, they're kind of spreading out. We have this one root here, you can see that it's starting to turn a little bit. So I'm going to take my pruner, and all I'm going to do is just prune that root. Just take it right out. I'm just going to prune a couple of them like that so that these roots will not be wrapping around the tree so much. And it's okay to prune the roots of this because it'll grow back really quickly. So now that I've pruned it and I like what it looks like, I'm going to put it in my hole and backfill again, just using the native soil, not using any compost or fertilizer. You really don't want to do that because the roots will just stay in that hole and never get out into the native soil. So we're putting it up at the same depth that it was in the pot. Mix the soil up around it, and we're all set. Now we have to water it. I could take the water from this tub to put it in there, and that would be fine, but I'll show you a couple other techniques that are even better. One, of course, is to put some mulch down. It could be bark mulch, it could be wood chips, whatever you want to put down. Put a nice layer around that shrub, and that will help prevent weeds from growing and preserve the moisture that's in the soil already. Then to keep it well watered, I certainly can water it in right now, but to keep it watered long term, you want to use a donut. These are watering donuts, and they kind of look like a donut with a hole in the middle, and it's basically plastic that's heavy duty, and you fill it up with water. Now this one's got a little water in it already, so I'm going to have to tug at it to get it over here. But the nice thing about these is that you can fill it up with a hose when it dries out, just opening up this cap, and then the water slowly oozes out through these little tubes in the bottom. This saves you a lot of time and a lot of effort, especially when you think of the hot, dry weather we get here in New England. If you can fill this up 2-3 times a week and let it just drip out, even during July and August when it's really hot, that's going to keep the roots growing, the plant healthy, and everything will just be beautiful, so that the second year you won't even have to use it anymore. I hope you've enjoyed this spring gardening show and learned some tips and techniques for making a more beautiful and more productive garden this season. New England is a beautiful place to live and has amazing gardens. Get out there and grow something. For more tips and information, go to cptv.org/New England Gardening with Charlie Nardozzi. We get lots of gardening email questions, so I wanted to answer a few on the show. Liz in Vermont loves to grow tomatoes, but she's wondering about blight. She's had problems with it in the past and doesn't want to have a problem this year. She's wondering if she should disinfect her cages and what she should do to treat her plants. Well, first of all, the blight will not be on the cages or the stakes, so you don't have to worry about that. But blight does get on the leaves, and it splashes up from the soil. So one of the things you could do, Liz, is put some mulch around the base of the plant. It could be a bark mulch, it could be a hay or straw or chopped leaves, something that's going to create a layer so that when the rain comes down, it doesn't splash that soil and the disease spores on the leaves, and you start getting those yellow spots all over your leaves. Of course, you could start with disease-resistant varieties. Defiant and Iron Lady are two good choices. If those things don't work, you can do some sprays. There are some organic sprays like this Serenade, which is an organic fungicide. You can spray on the leaves. But any of these sprays, whether it be compost tea, Serenade, copper, sulfur, any of those sprays are only going to work to prevent it from spreading. It's not going to get rid of the disease once you have it. But at least you'll get some good tomatoes. Now, another question I get a lot of is what happens to your flowering bulbs and why don't they flower every year? People have tulips and daffodils and hyacinths, and sometimes they just come up with leaves and that's it. So you can see a good example right here where we have some beautiful tulips right next to this whole clump here that has no flowers at all. What'll happen often, especially with tulips, is that they kind of get a little tired. They get crowded and they need to be dug and lifted and separated. So after they're done flowering and after these leaves yellow, what you want to do is dig up the whole clump, separate out the bulbs, and then replant them either in the same place or a similar location. Maybe mix a little bulb booster fertilizer in there too. You can either plant them immediately or hold on to them and plant them in the fall when we normally will be planting spring flowering bulbs. By doing that every so often, especially with the tulips and hyacinths, they're the ones that seem to be the big culprits, then you can keep them in flower longer. Now, Karen, back in Vermont, had a question about wool mulch. Now, this is something that she's read about, where you can put wool around your plants. This is sheep's wool, raw sheep's wool, around your plants to keep the insects away. Well, Karen, I'm not quite sure about insects, but I do know that this works for slugs and snails. You can just mulch with this, just like you would mulch with bark mulch or wood chips, around your hostas, around your lettuce, whatever plants the slugs and snails are going after, and they don't like it. It might be because of the scratchy nature of the wool, or it might be because of the tannins. We're not quite sure, but I've actually seen professional gardeners in England using this in the gardens. That's where I first saw it, and it works really well. So if you know someone who has a sheep farm, maybe you have a sheep farm, grab some of that raw wool that you're not going to use and use it as a mulch. Finally, Mary, back in Connecticut, had a question about a wild parsnip. This is a plant that's growing in her yard, and it looks just like a parsnip, but it's a wild plant. She said she dug up the roots, and the roots actually taste like parsnips and carrots. Well, that is in fact a weed. It is called wild parsnip. There's another one related to it called hogweed, but if it's a small plant, it's probably the wild parsnip. How you're going to know the difference between the two is that the wild parsnip has a yellow flower, the hogweed has a white flower and a much bigger plant. So while the root is an edible root, it's in that carrot family and parsnip family, the tops are actually a problem. Because if you get any of that sap from the leaves on your skin on a sunny day, it causes blistering like poison ivy. So I would say, try to get rid of that plant. Try to dig it out or pull it out. Don't let it spread because you'll see it all over the place on roadsides, in abandoned meadows and places of that nature. It's not a good plant to have in the environment. So try to pull those out, but do it with gloves and long sleeves on them, and don't do it on a sunny day. Well, I've always loved being outside. So being outdoors is just a lot of fun for me. And then I've always loved to eat. So the combination of eating and outdoors kind of pushed me right towards gardening. Yeah, it was one of those things where when you're growing up, you don't really think too much about whatever's happening in your life having an influence on you, but we always had a garden, and we had, as I mentioned, like Italian grandfather's farm, so it just was kind of there all the time. And then when I got old enough to actually start having to make decisions about what I'm going to do with my life, it seemed like the combination of being able to be outside and also being able to grow plants was kind of a nice mix for me. So I pursued that. And then it just kind of got a bit of an addiction since then, where I've been created my whole career just around gardening. So in each one of the seasons as they come up, there's something special about the garden. And that's really a nice thing about gardening, especially gardening in New England, is that it's always changing. The weather's changing, the seasons quickly shift from one to the other. So in spring, it's just the excitement of all the bulbs coming up and the early flowers, the early shrubs that are blooming, the greening of the grass. We often will just kind of look out and say, oh, the grass is a little greener today. And that's just very exciting after our long winters of having brown or white all winter long, to have that nice color. And then once we kind of get into the whole feeling of the season, the summer comes, and then it just gets to be an explosion of not only edible plants, but flowering perennials and annuals. The trees are kind of past the flowering stage, and now we're starting to fruit. And it's just an abbondanza, as they say in Italian, just an abundance that's happening. And then fall is always really nice because you kind of get a little burned out of summer. You know, you've been a lot of hot weather and working really hard, and fall is cooler and things kind of slow down. The gardens still look great. In fact, where we live in Vermont, it's often the best time to come here is in September, when the gardens are just overflowing with color, with different kinds of flowers blooming, with food, all kinds of things. So it's kind of a time to get ready for winter and kind of start canning and storing things and dreaming again of spring. Right now, a lot of people feel very claustrophobic, very much homebound, and can't really go very far. And gardening is a great release. It's a way to get you outside. It's an excuse for being outside. You can very easily socially distance in a garden, unless you have a very small garden. But it's also a time that you can just have a little control over what's going on in your life. You can grow some flowers, some food for your family. When so many other things are out of your control, you can really create something beautiful and something that's very helpful for your family just in your backyard. So having that there gives you the opportunity to help make you feel better about life and have a little more peace of mind. So my favorite type of plant, wow, it changes every year. Every time I see a new plant, it's like, oh, that's my favorite one. So certainly I love tomatoes. And there's one variety called persimmon that I really like. It's an orange variety. It's a nice big tomato, great slicing tomato, but it has the color of a mango, and it has kind of a sweetness and a nice acid blend to it. So it's a really nice heirloom variety that I like to grow. So that in the edible world is what I really like. For shrubs, there's a plant called a dwarf Korean spice viburnum. It's a mouthful, but it's a viburnum that has very fragrant, beautiful aromatic flowers, and then it has beautiful berries in the fall too for the birds. So that's really sweet. What's my favorite flower? I'm trying to think. Peonies. I love peonies, especially the yellow peonies. There's a lot of new varieties of the yellow peonies out there. They have a great big flower to them that you can just cut and float in a vase and bring it indoors, so it's really sweet to have. I have a greenhouse, so I've been getting into trying different things. So over the years, I've tried a number of exotic kinds of plants and vegetables and edibles that you normally couldn't grow outside in this climate. So I've grown ginger in there, for example, and gotten baby ginger, which is kind of fun. That's great for all kinds of ethnic cooking. Being a vegetarian, I love to try different foods from around the world. So I eat a lot of Indian food, which is really nice. We also eat a lot of Thai food. I used to live in Thailand. So I grow lemongrass, which is another great herb to have for growing. And this year I'm trying to grow chickpeas or garbanzos because I love making hummus and eating Middle Eastern food. So trying some unusual things is always part of my repertoire, what I try to do. We have a kind of a standing joke in our family is that I love to kill plants. In fact, I've killed a bunch of citrus plants. I still haven't mastered the citrus. Lemon trees, lime trees, oranges, they last for a year or two, then they're gone. So there's always a challenge in gardening, but that makes it fun. We have a lot of great native plants in New England. So some of my favorite ones are some of the trees, some of the native trees. The amelanchier or the serviceberry is a beautiful tree that blooms early in the spring, so it's one of those nice harbingers of warmer weather coming. Has white flowers, and then it has these beautiful blue berries that the birds love, but there actually are varieties that will produce large berries the size of a blueberry. And so it can be a wild edible for you as well as a beautiful ornamental tree, and it has nice fall foliage color too. So that's a nice one. Another tree that I really enjoy is the pagoda dogwood. It's a native tree and it has kind of a Japanese pagoda shape to it. So it's really kind of cool structure on the tree. Well, I'm pushing the envelope. I'm working hard at it. I'm growing persimmons, which there is an American persimmon that's hardy here. I'd love to be able to grow the Asian ones, which are the ones you normally see in the markets. Haven't quite got there yet. But having lived in Thailand for 3 years, I got really enamored with all the fruits and tropical fruits there. So I would love to be able to grow lychees and longans and all these other types of fruits and mangoes. Avocados. Wouldn't that be great to grow an avocado? Yeah, not in my lifetime. If you have young children, just to get them out in the garden is really important. Even if they're only a couple years old, get them playing in the soil. Don't expect much. Don't expect them to plant things and weed and all that other stuff. But get them out there playing and getting comfortable in it. It's kind of like swimming. You get kids comfortable with water when they're young. When they're older, they never have a fear of swimming, and they're able to swim all over the place and do well with it. It's the same thing with gardening and nature. If they've been introduced to it at a young age and feel real comfortable around it, then they're always going to be that way throughout their life, and it's going to be a lifelong passion that they can have. Yeah, so I've kind of developed this brand with my hats, and I always wear them when I'm on camera or even just going around town, and people kind of know me as the guy who wears the hats. And that came up really very practically is when I was in Thailand and it was really hot and I had to wear a hat because there's not a lot of protection on my head. So I just got in the habit of wearing them, and when I came back, I continued to do that in the summertime especially. And then when I started doing TV and live appearances, it just seemed like the hat went with me, and now it's become a thing. So whenever I travel, wherever I go doing talks and conferences and stuff, I always look to see if there's a hat shop around or some hat vendors. So I do have a little bit of a collection from not only around the country, but around the world. I'm Charlie Nardozzi, garden expert and hat lover too. I started wearing hats out of practicality because my hair changed magically over time, so I needed protection. I also started doing TV around the same time, and people started noticing my hats on TV and then asking me about them. Before you know it, everywhere I go, I buy a different hat, and now I've got a collection of different hats for the summer and for the winter too. It starts with this hat that I got in California that's actually made out of paper, believe it or not. Really comfortable hat. This one I got on one of my garden tours to France that I lead every year. And this one is a really nice one to drink a little wine with. Ooh la la, comment ça va? How are you? Very nice. This hat comes from Ecuador. My wife Wendy won a trip to the Galapagos Islands, and she took me, of all people. I got a hat out of it too. When it's rainy outside, you need something to put on your head that's waterproof and something that can get dirty and can be washed. That's why I have a Tilly hat. This one I use mostly around the garden. It looks kind of grungy sometimes, but throw it in the wash, it's all set. And then finally, living in New England, well, we've got a lot of mosquitoes and insects. So I have my mosquito netting hat that I can wear right over my head, keep the bugs away so I can keep working.